And we have three presenters for our waiver webinar. The first presenter is Mrs. Marty Swank. Marty Swank served in the U.S. Navy, where she met her husband, a Navy pilot. They moved frequently to locations including Guam, Spain, California, Florida, and Virginia. She received her bachelor's degree from California Lutheran University and a master's degree in the community counseling from Regent University. Her career path has included positions as summer youth admissions coordinator, admissions counselor for retraining programs, foster care director, employee assistance programs, counselor, coordinator, in-home counselor, and the current position with the City of Virginia Beach Developmental Services Case Management Unit as a Clinician 3, Support Coordinator and Admissions Coordinator. Marty is married and has 2 adult children and 4 grandchildren. Our second presenter is Mrs. Jessica Hurd. Jessica Hurd was born and raised in California and received a bachelor's degree in speech and hearing sciences from the University of California at Santa Barbara. Jessica has worked as a case manager since the early 1990s for the ARC of Hawaii, then moving to Fredericksburg and finally to Virginia Beach. Jessica is married with a son in the Coast Guard and a daughter studying occupational therapy at West Virginia University. She has worked for the City of Virginia Beach Department of Human Services since 1999 as a Clinician 2 for Developmental Services, the trainer for the electronic health record, and currently in Developmental Services as a member of the intake team. Our third presenter is Mrs. Nicole Woodall. Nicole Woodall has supported individuals with disabilities since she was a teenager. She's had an aunt with a disability. She spent summers during her college years working at a camp for individuals with disabilities and provided in-home supports after college. Nicole has worked for the City of Virginia Beach for 20 years. She spent 9 years working at SkillQuest Day Support Program with the city when the city then transitioned to the DD Case Management Unit with the city where she worked for the past 11 years. Nicole graduated from Old Dominion University with a bachelor's degree in therapeutic recreation. She was born in Wisconsin, go Packers, and while growing up, she lived in Ohio, Texas, Kentucky, and Virginia. She has lived in Virginia Beach for the past 30 years. She is married with 2 teenage children, 2 dogs, a bird, and a fish. I'd like to welcome the presenters tonight, and I turn this podium over to you, Marty.
All right, thank you. And welcome to our case management overview. And as Lisa said, we will take questions at the end. So I'm going to start with this first area is just our City of Virginia Beach Human Services Strategic Plan, and we have these 4 pillars. The next is just a slide of our city and department leadership. And then we begin with our overview of developmental services and DD case management. So the case management unit serves individuals diagnosed with intellectual or developmental disabilities throughout their lifespan. So we serve people from birth to death, essentially. Case management services include assessing people's needs, accessing funding sources with them, and then linking and referring them to the appropriate services, sometimes those such as DARS or REACH. And then we help coordinate services, we develop individual service plans, and monitor the satisfaction of services. So essentially what we do, we use the acronym CLAM, coordinate, link, assess, and monitor services. And then eligibility for services, we look at eligibility for the ID population as well as the DD population. And it's different for each one of those categories, which I will mention after this slide. But we look at diagnostic information, the financial information, and the DD waiver wait list. In 2016, we became sort of the entry point for both developmental delay individuals as well as the intellectual disability population. We had always done the intellectual disability population screenings to place people on the wait list as well as them entering into case management. But in 2016, that changed, and we then became the entry point for the DD population as well. So the diagnosis criteria that we look at when someone comes in under the intellectual disability, we look at the psychological evaluation that must be completed by a licensed clinical psychologist. A diagnosis of ID prior to the age of 18 must be present in that psychological evaluation. They also have to list adaptive functioning skills of the person, as well as the age of onset. So for example, with the ID diagnosis, you must have testing results with the diagnosis of whether the person has a mild, moderate, severe, profound intellectual disability. So their age of onset may be at birth, such as Down syndrome. It might be noticed at birth, maybe age 2 or beyond that. But so long as it's diagnosed prior to the age of 18, a person can fall under the category of intellectual disability. Under the developmental disability, it's somewhat similar as far as we need testing results again on a psychological evaluation, sometimes school records or school psychological evaluation, and sometimes medical records. If it's a medical diagnosis, something like cerebral palsy or muscular dystrophy could fall into this. And then it would be more records of a medical nature by a credentialed professional like a doctor, a medical doctor. And with this, again, if you're looking at autism as one of the diagnoses, then you would need to have testing results that are stating, that the person does have autism. So we look at, the difference in developmental disabilities. It's a little bit more wide of a range, I guess, because you're looking at autism, cerebral palsy, Fragile X syndrome. You're looking at a variety of different disabilities. Could be things like traumatic brain injury, for example. And then how to apply for the ID and DD services. For Virginia Beach, you would call our office and request an application packet. And we list our phone number here, 757-385-0600 is our main number. And that number is answered Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Outside of federal holidays, we would be closed. You can do that. You can come into Pembroke 6, although we do encourage now, phone is better at this time to at least call us and prepare us if you do need to come by for an application. But we're located off of Virginia Beach Boulevard, right behind the Chick-fil-A, if you're familiar with that area. Most people are. So pretty easy access to our building. And then our email addresses are listed here for your convenience, along with our fax number. And that's 757-473-5235. And then you can mail your application to us as well at the address listed here. So there's several ways that you can send information back to us. But also going back to the application packet, just so you know, when you do call for an application, there are going to be things that you need to know. We ask for the person's name that's calling, who the application is for, the person's date of birth, if they have insurance, what that insurance is. We would like to know, if possible, the diagnosis of the person, if they have ID or DD, and then certainly be prepared with providing a phone number, an address, a mailing address, and an email address, especially if you want the application emailed to you. And then how to apply for other ID and DD services throughout our community. We thought it would be helpful to put down other numbers to contact, since tonight's presentation doesn't just touch Virginia Beach, it reaches out to other communities. So here you have the different boards listed, and they may have a different application process than we do. So some of the things that we might talk about tonight, you might just double check in those areas. Like if you're in Chesapeake, please call their community services board and check to see that their process is, the same. So we have Chesapeake listed, Colonial, which is Williamsburg, Eastern Shore, Hampton, Newport News, Norfolk, and then Virginia Beach, as I stated, and then Western Tidewater CSB. So those are the different CSBs that you can contact. And then I'm going to hand this over to Jessica Hurd.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the application packet and the information that we ask you to supply for determination of eligibility for case management services, and then or to be placed on the DD community-based waiver waiting list. So once you contact us at the ways that Marty had mentioned, we will send you an application by the preferred method. And then there's a cover letter that lists additional documents that we need to verify eligibility for services. And that includes the completed application, a psychological evaluation, copies of insurance cards, birth certificate, verification of residency, and verification of income. So if the individual requesting services is under the age of 18, then the income of the family is looked at. If the individual is over the age of 18, then we look at that person's income, such as a Social Security SSI award letter. Once we've reviewed the entire application packet, somebody or a member of the admission team will contact you to set up an admission appointment. So we've determined that the person is eligible for DD or ID case management services. And then if they desire placement on the statewide waiting list, then that would be what we determine at the admission appointment. We'd schedule an appointment. We've been doing them via Zoom during this pandemic. And then we also have them in person at our office at Pembroke 6. And also, if needed, we can come to family members' homes. No, sorry, not yet. What we then do during that admission appointment is review all of the HIPAA information, individual rights, and we complete the Virginia Individual Developmental Disability Eligibility Survey, also called the VIDES, which must be completed for each person that is placed on the waiver waiting list. So they need to meet criteria in 3 of the 8 categories for children, for adults, and 2 of the 8 categories for children. We also review the different DD waiver services that are available through the community-based waiver and determine a priority status and if there's a need for active case management or monitoring case management. Monitoring case management, that is done for every person that is placed on the waiver waiting list. And they are contacted at least annually to update their current status, any health issues, update eligibility of service needs, or if an individual turns 18, what we do is we have to redo the VIDES assessment for the adult. Individuals who are in monitoring status can call a member of the admission team at any time if there's a change during the year or if they need assistance with accessing other community resources. There are no fees for monitoring services. Active case management means that we would assign that individual to a case manager who would work with that person on an ongoing basis. The case manager needs to make contact within 3 business days of being assigned and then schedule a service plan meeting. After the service planning meeting takes place and outcomes are developed, the case manager will continue to work with that person to link them to services that are needed and then to monitor the satisfaction of those services. Case management is Medicaid covered service. And if the cost of services, well, if Medicaid is not obtained by the individual or if it is lost at any time, we do an assessment and determine a sliding fee scale for individuals to pay a percentage of the cost of case management services. And then the last step after we do an admission meeting, if the person is on monitoring or active case management, immediately after that admission meeting, we enter the individual into the Virginia Waiver Management System, also called WAMS. That is the statewide waiver waiting list that is managed by the Behavioral Health and Developmental Services Department of Virginia. Information is added into WAMS by the admission case manager, and we have to state the date of eligibility, their diagnosis, any demographic information, their priority status. If they are priority 1, then it would be a critical needs summary, the VIDES assessment, and what waiver services are needed by that individual. This needs to be updated annually, and the state will also send families a form that needs to be completed and returned to the state every year to maintain their placement on the waiver waiting list. I will now hand over the presentation to Nicole.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk a little. Sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about waiver services. And for those of you that may not know, simply a waiver slot is funding for services through Medicaid. DBHCS determines the type and number of new slots made available to each CSB. So the General Assembly meets, they come up with a state budget, and then sometime after July 1, they grant waiver slots based on priority and critical need score. Vacated slots are assigned throughout the year. So if somebody were to pass away or move out of state, then their slot would become available and we would have a slot meeting. And if you have a waiver slot, you can go anywhere in Virginia, but when you go out of state, you lose that waiver slot. Once we're given these waiver slots, there's a waiver slot assignment committee that's formed. The regional DBHDS regional support specialist oversees all the WASAC meetings, records slot assignment, and reports assignments to DBHDS. So the Waiver Slot Assignment Committee, this is an impartial body of DBHDS trained volunteers for each locality region responsible for assigning waiver slots according to urgency of need. It's comprised of community members who are not affiliated with the CSB or a private provider. Members typically have some knowledge and or experience with persons with DD or the service system. So you might see a family member that's had a child with the waiver for a long time. It might be a retired case manager or like a an employee, retired day support provider or something. Go ahead. All right. So there's DD waiver, and under the waiver, there are 3 types of waiver. The first one is community living waiver. This is a really comprehensive waiver. It includes 24/7 residential services. So that would be a group home type setting. It includes services for adults and children, including those with intense medical and/or behavioral needs. Children need to try to access services through EPSDT or CCC Plus waiver prior to accessing the same services through the DD waiver. The next waiver is the Family and Individual Supports waiver. This offers a lot of the same things that the community living offers, but the supports occur within the home. So they're either living with their families or friends, or they live in their own homes. This offers residential services that are not 24 hours a day. It supports individuals with some medical or behavioral needs and is available to both children and adults. And offers group day support, community engagement, employment support, and therapeutic consultation. The last waiver is building independence. This is for our more independent individuals. This is for adults over the age of 18 who are able to live in the community with minimal supports. So what minimal supports might look like, they need help refilling their medications, going to the grocery store, maybe paying bills. It's going to be a limited number of hours of support they get a week, maybe 20 to 25. They typically lease or own their own home. It does not include 24/7 residential services. So even though they may be living in an apartment on their own, they need to be able to be independent for most of the day, most days of the week. But in this waiver, it does include the community engagement and employment supports. So other Medicaid funded services is the Commonwealth Coordinated Care, it's the CCC Plus waiver. This shows you how to apply. Your child, you call the health department. For adults, you call Adult Protective Services. You ask them for a CCC Plus waiver screening. The early periodic screening, diagnostic, and treatment, which is the EPSDT, is for children under the age of 21 who have Medicaid. Or Medicaid FAMIS Plus through a managed care organization. And the services that EPSDT may cover are ABA therapy, speech, occupational, physical therapy, some residential supports, and then maybe some health equipment of some sort, and then hearing, visual, and dental. A doctor has to fill in some forms, and you can go online and search EPSDT, and there's tons of information for you. And then we just put, how to apply for Medicaid at the bottom. So the current trends of the state is they're moving towards people becoming more independent in the community and being integrated into services. So what used to be called pre-vocational services or a sheltered workshop no longer exists. The state really wants to push people into employment situations where they're working with individuals without disabilities. And then also, when our waiver slots are granted after July 1st, we tend to get more of the FIS slots than the community living slots. Remember, the community living slots includes group homes and residential type settings. There are a lot of people applying for services. So right now in the state of Virginia, there are about 13,000 individuals on the waiver waiting list. For Virginia Beach alone, I checked, it's right around 300 people on the waiting list. And just so you know, the state granted us last year right around 40 waiver slots. So it's not a quick process for a lot of people. The waiting list is long, but we do our best to help link you to other services as well. And then also, the state has made changes, and there in some areas and for some services, there might be limited provider availability because the state did come up with some new services, and providers are kind of trying to catch up with those services that are offered. And that is all for now. If you have any questions, please ask.
Yes, we're going to open it this time. Lisa, do we have any questions?
Right now, we don't have any questions, but I'll give our guests time to kind of process what we've just gone over. And they can actually get a snapshot of the contact us form, just in case they want to contact someone. All right, we have one question. Yay. So this question is the process the same for all cities?
No, the process may be different. The eligibility criteria would be the same, but their process may be slightly different. We tend to ask for more documentation up front. And part of that is so that when someone really needs a waiver slot or really needs services, that we have their file pretty much ready to go for active case management. So it sort of helps streamline the process in the long run. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, great. Is this best to start at 17 or should they wait until 18?
They can really start at any time. I would say 17, only because if the person has an intellectual disability and they do not have it properly diagnosed or written in a psychological evaluation, you want to give yourself plenty of time to have that evaluation done prior to 18. Hopefully that's already done, but if not, just make sure that you have everything documented.
Okay, will there be a follow-up on how to access services once a waiver is granted?
Yes.
Sorry, let me get my video back on. Okay, so once a waiver is granted to an individual, they are assigned to an active case manager, and that support coordinator case manager will help guide the person through accessing the services that they need and ensuring that a treatment plan is developed and that all the authorizations are submitted to DBHDS for payment through the waiver.
Okay, perfect. And ladies, you can all turn on your cameras if you want. That way it'll make it a little easier. And just unmute yourselves if you can answer the question. Is there a program both medically and income based?
If you're asking if it was medically based and financially based, is that the question?
I think what they're asking, yes. So is the program based on medical needs and income that's coming in, or is it just two separate things, two separate entities? Or is that something that's individually based question?
There is a financial eligibility component, and that's where Medicaid comes in many times, because if you're looking for the DD waiver slot, that is a Medicaid paid or funded service. So you have to have Medicaid in order to access that DD waiver. But if you're just asking for case management, that can be an out-of-pocket cost if you wanted to self-pay for services. And then as far as the medical component, if the person has like a DD diagnosis and a medical diagnosis from a doctor, they could meet medically as well. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Okay, if that didn't answer your question, go ahead and type me another question just in case, so that we can make sure you have a clear understanding. So if we already have the CCC plus a waiver, then we can apply for the ID or DD waivers?
Yes, so you can be on the waiver waiting list, the DD waiver waiting list, and have the CCC plus waiver. You cannot have both of them at the same time. If the CCC plus waiver is meeting your needs, then we would just keep your priority at a priority 2 or 3. Oftentimes it does meet people's needs while they're children or under the age of 22 because they're in school and that they have the supports in the evenings. Once those supports don't meet the needs of the individual, then we would move up the priority for the DD waiver waiting list, since that offers more services and supports. So yeah, you can be on the wait list, and I would suggest being on the wait list, but keep your CCC plus waiver until then.
Great. So parents stated that they waited 16 years for their son to get a waiver and had to really fight for it through numerous complaints. If you have the FIS waiver and need the CLW, what is the process?
The first step would be to talk with your case manager about that, because different boards may have different procedures for this. But generally, you would have to give up your waiver to go back on the wait list for a community living waiver, has been what we've been told the majority of the time. So there may be other options, but I would definitely talk to your case manager about that.
Okay. Next question. Can you go over the difference between intellectual disability and developmental disability?
So an intellectual disability, the old terminology was called mental retardation. So an IQ score is generally 70 or below, and they're diagnosed with either mild, moderate, severe, or profound intellectual disability. And this has to be diagnosed prior to the age of 18. Sometimes traumatic brain injury can fall into that category if it's been diagnosed prior to the age of 18. And then a developmental disability, I believe I'd mentioned before, can be something like autism, which there again, you would need to have an evaluation done with testing to state what the tests were that were provided to come up with that diagnosis. And then it has to be written by a credentialed professional. Generally, it's a licensed clinical psychologist. And other developmental disabilities can be something from birth. It can be a genetic condition, like a chromosomal deficiency, and that may be a developmental disability. Cerebral palsy could be seen as a developmental disability, so a DD disability. Muscular dystrophy, or traumatic brain injury if it's after 18, but it happens prior to the age of 22. So the DD diagnosis has to be diagnosed prior to the age of 22. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay, and can the psychological evaluation be done through school?
Yes, the psychological evaluation can be done through the school. Usually that's, I believe that is looked at the triennial for children with the IEP meetings, and that would be a good place to bring that up if one has not been done. You could talk to your child's teacher or the school about that, and they may have a procedure that you would want to follow with them.
Okay. Does active case management affect the EDCD/CCC plus waiver management?
No, you can have active case management with the CCC plus waiver. Yeah, the only thing is if there needs to be something that is being worked on. So there has to be active goals. So, trying to think of an example for you. Okay, yeah, so if someone is searching for employment, say, then, we would have a goal to help that individual find an employment provider, go through the DARS process, all of that, or if it's for finding residential supports, maybe that case would be open for that. Otherwise, Medicaid really doesn't, if we don't have something active that we're working on, then we just stick with monitoring, which is fine. It's kind of as needed. You call us when you have questions, we can make referrals. And if we don't know the answer, we can hopefully point you in the right direction.
Okay, we have great questions coming in. So does the DD waiver trump the CCC plus waiver? And where can you get a psychological evaluation?
There are multiple places for psychological evaluation, if not school. There I don't know, local psychology offices. We do have a list. If you want to call the Virginia Beach office, we could provide you with a list of places to get a psychological evaluation. I know there's one place called Genesis. I can't think of the others off the top of my head right this second. Sorry, part 2 of that question was?
The other part of the question was, let me go back. Had to do with the waivers. Let me see.
Oh, the
yeah.
community-based waiver. They're based on the services that are needed. The CCC Plus waiver provides personal assistance services and respite, whereas the community-based waiver just has a larger array of services. So if the person is in need of employment or residential, or a day support program, or more intensive crisis support or therapeutic consultation, then the community-based waiver it offers more services than the CCC Plus.
Okay, so I had 2 individuals. Oh, do we want to?
I'm sorry, there's also, you can check with your insurance provider on who can provide or who does psychological testing based on the insurance that the individual has.
Perfect. Okay, so I had someone say that this is a very good training, so we're doing a great job, and that's wonderful to hear. Thank you so much. They're asking, will the training be on agency websites for families and individuals to watch? I know from our standpoint, we will be hosting this on our Chesapeake Public Schools YouTube channel, and if you go to our website, cpschools.com, you'll see the YouTube channel, and we'll have it posted. It normally takes us about a week to get that up there, so look for it within the next week or so. So I have another person who stated that they haven't been able to get access to services, I guess, based on their location. Is it because of where they live? Should they move to a bigger city? Or what other ways can they tap into waiver services? I know that sometimes some areas may not have as many services like Virginia Beach or Chesapeake. So where could they go, or what could they do to tap into those services?
Does that person have a case manager by chance? Or if they're missing out on that, they might need to reach out to the city that's closest to them. Or if you want to give us a call, we could potentially help you. If you give us your location, we could maybe determine what community services board would be in your region. And that might help you, because we have something called community resource consultants that are regional. And we can sometimes reach out to them if we don't know the answer as well. And then they can give us, feedback on what numbers to potentially provide you. And the other thing that Jessica just mentioned was the ARC is another place to reach out for services.
Great. If you're placed on the waiting list, does your eligibility change the longer you wait?
The eligibility is really based on your priority, your urgency for need, essentially, and your need for services. So some people are on there for many years because they might start, getting their child on there early. Other people, because of a serious situation that's gone on, may get a waiver slot sooner than somebody that's been on there for years. So it's really based on urgency of need and the person's actual needs and need for services. So for example, if you're, let's say, a two-parent family, you're doing pretty well with your child, there are, minimal behavioral issues, minimal medical issues, and the needs are low, compared to, let's say, an 87-year-old parent that has serious health conditions and there's no other family members, that person takes urgency over the other one. So that person would more than likely get a waiver slot before the younger person in that situation, potentially.
Can you apply for the DD waiver if you have the EDCD?
Yes, you certainly can. You can be receiving the EDCD is now the CCC Plus waiver. So you can have the CCC Plus waiver and still receive our services and be on the wait list. So we could have you in monitoring and be on the wait list. You could even receive our case management if you didn't have a DD waiver and have the CCC Plus waiver in place.
If a child has been diagnosed with autism and is already engaged in speech therapy services, how else could case management services benefit them?
So let me make sure I have this right. So the individual has autism, getting speech therapy.
Through the school system,
Okay.
how else could services benefit them?
So are you talking about case management services or once they get a waiver slot?
They said case management services. How else could that benefit them?
It really depends on their needs. If there's, like behavioral issues, we might be able to help link the individual to a specific therapy center, or if I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, or some in-home supports that might be needed. Community involvement if the individual, needs more socialization, more outlets for activities, then we might be able to help find those for the individual. But it would probably be, monitoring might meet the needs of that individual. If you don't have a lot of needs at this time, but maybe have a question every few months, need a referral somewhere, then you would just call one of us and we would help you with that.
Perfect. Okay, we have another question. What if the school testing has your child placed in the ID program, but the medical doctor's testing does not diagnose your child as ID? Do you need to get another opinion?
So if I had the question in front of me here for a second too. Let me make sure I have the question.
So
here.
so apparently the school has done the evaluation, has
Okay.
diagnosed them as being ID. However,
Okay.
the medical doctor has a different diagnosis. So should they get another opinion?
I guess it depends on if that's really in conflict with each other, because if you have a psychological evaluation that's written and says the individual has an intellectual disability and the school has them placed in an intellectually disabled classroom, I would say that the school generally would have a pretty good feel for that. As far as the medical doctor, a medical doctor does not diagnose an intellectual disability. It's done by a psychologist, a licensed clinical psychologist. So a medical doctor would more than likely be diagnosing maybe a developmental disability, let's say cerebral palsy. And in that case, the person could really almost have an ID and a DD diagnosis. And that would not really be in conflict with our services at all. It's not unusual for someone to potentially have ID and autism, or sometimes Down syndrome and autism. So, but I always think that if you feel like there's a need for a more thorough evaluation, that is something that as a parent or a family member, you certainly can pursue. And again, I would go back to your insurance carrier and find out who's in your network as a licensed clinical psychologist to have that done.
All right. My children have severe cerebral palsy, but also have profound intellectual disabilities. How do I know which one to use?
It's similar to what I just said in the sense that if they have an intellectual disability and cerebral palsy, it's sort of a combination of both. Intellectual disability, if they're a child, usually is the main diagnosis when they come in for us and the way we have to categorize things.
Okay, if I have the FIS waiver for my son and notice that many of the services on the FIS waiver are offered on it, but are not available in the local area where I live, is that an issue that you are aware of?
Yes, and I believe Jessica spoke on this just slightly, that we do know that when the state changed services all the way from 2016 up till now, they keep changing and adding services, that there are some services that the DD waiver offers as a service, but those services may or may not be available in our catchment area because there may not be a provider for that service that has been established yet.
Let's see here. I guess someone that's actually typed in, what she meant to say is testing and eligibility need to be done. Again, the longer you wait. I guess that goes back to.
It would be based on when the initial diagnosis was done. If, let's say, somebody was diagnosed with an intellectual disability at age 4 or 5, we usually recommend they have another one done in their teen years to better capture their functional skills in that psychological evaluation. But then as long as for intellectual disability, as long as it's before the age of 18, and for developmental disability, as long as it's before the age of 22. We just want the most accurate information that best captures that person's abilities and where they might need supports. Just helps to better link them. You want the most current. And again, the schools are often a good place to ask for this at the triennial evaluations. They can request a psychological evaluation every 3 years.
Okay, and can an individual fall into both ID and DD categories?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and if the CCC plus waiver, and if I have the CCC plus waiver, sorry, and your child turns 18 and is on the DD waiver waiting list, will they lose the CCC plus services? So let me back up a little bit. So they have the CCC plus waiver. Then the child turns 18 and they're waiting on the DD waiver. But in the meantime, while they're waiting for that waiver, do they lose the CC plus services?
They do not. They can keep that CCC plus waiver all the way up until the point they get a DD waiver slot. However, when it comes to the CCC plus program, I know that some families have lost hours with that. So I don't want to discount that factor that sometimes the hours are decreased for personal attendant services. So I don't want to say an absolute here, but they wouldn't lose it once they turn 18.
Okay, and I think I have a parent that's asking about pamphlets or booklets that parents can be provided. And I know that most of this information is individually based upon where your zone, your child's school is zoned. But they, I know for Chesapeake, we have our office, which is the Office of Family and Community Engagement. You can contact us, and we have a plethora of resources that you can use. I don't know, from your standpoint, can people contact you or contact someone in their area to get resources on disability awareness and services that are available?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. They can contact us. However, if they have, if they're on the wait list, or even if they have a waiver, they can go on to the state's website, the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. And there's a document, I'm just going to show you what it looks like. And this is what they can pull up. It's called Navigating the Developmental Services. I don't know, I think can you read that at all?
Yes, we can see that, yes.
Okay. So it's Navigating the Developmental Disability Waivers. It's a guide for individuals, families, and support partners. And so just if you go on to that, the one that I have here is dated June 2019. There might be a more updated version on the website, but you can get a lot of information on the website. So again, it stands for Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services. And for short, we say D as in dog, B as in boy, H as in health, D as in dog, S as in services. And so if you go to that, you should be able to find more information. There's a tab in there that says Getting Help. And if you hover over the tab Getting Help, you will see some of these documents in there, My Life, My Community. There is something called the Individual Family Support Program Grant that if you're on the wait list, you can access as well. So that's a great website to link into.
Okay, and the last question that we have for tonight, I see that several people are asking for Chesapeake contact number. Our office, which was formerly the Parent Resource Center and is now the Family and Community Engagement Office, we're considered FACE. You can reach us at 757-482-5923. Again, that number is 482-5923, and ask for LaEunice Brown. Carol and Ruth Ann, do you want to share your contact information for Virginia Beach and Newport News?
Yes, this is Carol Blackwell from Virginia Beach City Public Schools. My phone number is 757-263-2066. And I also have a question from a parent. She wants to know, can family members qualify as paid service providers or home caregivers?
Sorry, I couldn't get my mute off. So during COVID, more families seem like they've been able to provide services for the individual in their home. However, we're hearing that the state is moving in a different direction where they may not always allow that service. But as of this time, families can, depending on the service. So like a companion type service, personal attendant services, some parents are actually providing that service right now.
So how do they qualify for that, or where do they apply for reimbursement or some type of compensation?
There are different agencies that provide some of the support, but if they're doing it via like CCC Plus waiver, they would contact their CCC Plus contact and get started that way. As far as the other services, if they have a case manager, I would touch base with the case manager.
Okay, great. And again, my phone number is 757-263-2066.
Thank you, Carol. I do. Thank you. This has been a really wonderful webinar, powerful. Throughout the webinar, in the Q&A, we have been getting positive responses from people. So this has been a really good webinar. They've really enjoyed it. It's been very informative. I've also noticed that people as far as Yorktown have joined us today. So we're really happy to have you here. This concludes our webinar. I do want to thank again the presenters, Martha Swank, Jessica Hurd, Nicole Woodall, and my Region 2 PRCs. I love you, love you, love you. Ruth Ann Newton from Newport News PRC, and Carol Blackwell from Virginia Beach PRC for collaborating with us to provide this webinar this evening. This webinar has been recorded and will be uploaded to the Chesapeake Public Schools YouTube page within the next several days. You can email me at Face. You do have my email, and I'll let you know when it's posted. Thank you for joining us this evening. And remember, families and communities work better together.